So here we are again. Here we are again. And today, Jacqueline's come up with a doozy of a subject. How to say no to your boss.
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? It's like interesting. Well, I do get in some ways or form, I get all sorts of questions asked at times, and this is an interesting one. It also, probably requires some context. A lot of the times, it has to do with additional work, and people don't want to say no. That could be some context, and it's never good to start a sentence with no, unless you're in a hostage situation. It's not advisable. So you want to find some other methods on conveying the topic of no, I'm not interested in more work.
Yes, look, I think that's the point. I also think there's some gender stuff going on here let's not ignore the elephant in the room. I think there is an issue between men and women, particularly with women who have been brought up to be good girls. It's hard to say no to authority. We've been domesticated. Men are very much the same, except men are likely to react with aggression. That's more likely to happen for a man. And then a man's more likely to forgive a man because he goes, "Oh, I understand you." But that doesn't make it right or in any way, shape, or
Well,
form.
the boss can also be a woman.
Can also be a woman. Of course, she can also be a woman.
but
Sorry if I
but
inferred otherwise.
yeah, you did highlight an interesting point and went straight to um, the differences between men and women, and I have to agree. This is what I've observed in my corporate career, and this is what I've observed in leadership roles, whether they were middle management or really high up. And what I also observed is initially when I started in a sort of senior leadership role and I was part of the management team, and I just noticed man can just say no. No, I'm not doing it. Ain't doing it. It's not happening. And for me, this was eye-opening, and it was interesting and helpful in a way that I thought, oh, right. Yeah, and I know
So did
we
you try
we
that tactic and how did it go?
um, I have tried it, but I put it into different wordings.
Okay.
I said things like, I have all these priorities, and if I'm going to take on that priority as well, something has to go. So it's a different way of saying no. Or, well, yeah, I'm happy to do it. So it starts with a positive note, happy to do this. Yeah, great thing. But I have all these things. Something's got to go. Something has to be
That
put
is a really
on
important
hold.
lesson you bring up there, Jacqueline, and I'm so good at it and repeat it. So what you're saying is that your boss comes to you and says, "Hey, can you do this, and this?" And you say, "Well, yeah, that's a great idea, and I certainly agree it needs to be done." Unfortunately, because I don't like the word "but," um, and which one of these other projects that I'm doing for you should I replace because I can't do that and that.
Yeah.
So that's
And
no to more work, but yes to the idea.
that's right. And it that's the way to go. You got to also manage up, and if it's too much, it's too much. But I'm also aware that people are afraid of their job security. So often they say yes, I'm doing it, and really dig themselves into a hole because it's far too much.
I was going to say,
But
how does
that
that
also,
work out? I mean, if
yeah, it
you've dug
doesn't.
yourself into a hole because you've taken on too much, now you've created a situation where you are going to fail.
That's right. That's also a really good point to say you created a situation where you were about going to fail.
Hmm.
Um, and I've seen it. Obviously, I've also taken on work at times where I probably should have negotiated better until I've learned that part.
Well, look,
Um,
I'll own the fact that I was terrible at saying no. I was terrible at saying no. It was made a principle of saying yes, I could do it. And where did that end up? Well, I can tell you, it ended up with burnout because I'm only human. Oh, welcome to the human race, John. But that's what happened.
that is
So
what
it,
happened.
it it not only cost me that job, which I eventually walked away from, so I didn't get fired. I walked away from that, but it then cost me something like, I don't know, a decade of success and higher pay rates and that I missed out on because I literally had to walk away from the workforce. Be very careful with your yeses.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you're not going to lose your job so fast. And it does help in, negotiation techniques. And burnout is huge. And in one of the large global corporations I worked, um, we had to do a lot of international calls because our clients, our peers, they were all over the shop. And it came to a point that the senior management of this corporation realized that their middle management and senior management is suffering from burnout because they have the thing that they think they need to be available all the time around the clock. So they
Yes.
started a campaign. They started a campaign and said you can actually say no, you negotiate which evenings you are available for calls and meetings
Mm, mm.
and which evenings are not. And it worked. And people, it was just really amazing. It relaxed the atmosphere. It also put a little bit of a damper to the head office. The head office was in France. Not nothing against France, beautiful country. It just happened to be in France, and the head office often expects there's certain expectations, and that might just be my perception, but they
Ooh,
also took a step back, as in realizing, okay, we can't just expect them to be available all the time.
and I have had exactly the same thing, except I was dealing with Austrians because head office was in Vienna. But when you're an international company, you can work 24/7. There's pretty much someone open for business somewhere on the planet at any one time. And, what contributes to that is differences in religions. So the religious days in the Middle East are Friday and Saturday, whereas Saturday and Sunday is the religious days in the West. So you can go work in different markets all the time, especially with the interconnectivity of the internet now. So you can keep going and going and going and going and going. And unless good leadership, which is what this organization shown in your situation, turns around and says, no, we're going to be smart on that, then you burn your staff out.
Yeah,
So this is interesting because it brings the responsibility. I want to talk about this for a minute. What is the responsibility of leaders to allow the space for their team to say no, or in a nicer way, saying to keep them informed of their where they're at on their workloads. I think
yeah,
they're if you want to be part of a healthy organization, then that healthy organization needs to be able to communicate freely uphill about what's going on in reality, rather than what the boss wants to think is going on.
yeah. That's right, and it does come back again to the also the relationship that's been created from the boss downwards and from from the team upwards. And I've heard stories from my clients where their boss has given them a whole other topic or a whole other country to serve, while they were
Hmm.
not there and couldn't even discuss with them, how feasible is it? And they've just, made that promise. And I've been, and not everyone then actually speaks up. This is
Well,
even worse,
even,
and the whole frustration gets bottled up, um, and it needs to be discussed.
and I think this is a very interesting point because I remember with my superiors in Vienna, I had to go to them and explain to them the size of Australia. So, because they had it that Australia's only got 24 million people. How big can this place be? So
Huge.
I took them a map that superimposed Australia on America and on Europe. I said, now understand, there's only about three countries bigger: China, Brazil, and Russia. It's 5 hours to fly from Brisbane to Perth. It's international travel without the advantage of duty-free shopping. So, um, but so then I think the moral in that story is keep your boss informed. Don't keep the good oil to yourself. Keep them informed of what's going on. Don't make it a surprise. Oh, surprise! I'm too busy. That doesn't go down well with the boss, right? So if you
That's
keep them informed and say, hey, this is what's going on. I'm at about, I don't know, probably flat tack. I'm at 35 hours a week now, so I'm getting to that border zone. And the things that go a little bit wrong, I'm well over 40. So, you know, this is where we're at. I'm not complaining, just letting you know. So as you're aware, that's all. I'm coping. We're going well. Doesn't hurt to let them know.
that's also a very good point. If you just sort of quietly, work slave away and don't say anything, someone might think, oh, maybe there's a little bit of room there to squeeze another task in. And and on the other side, the boss also knows that people who are really busy, they, you can give them another task and it will be
Yes.
will be
Yes,
done.
exactly. If you want something done, always ask a busy person to do it. Yes, because they'll get it organized. And that does come down to personal responsibility, doesn't it, Jacqueline? Because
It is,
you
yeah.
have to check in yourself and say, hey, am I emotionally reacting to this? And I and or am I dealing with the facts? Is it true that I'm overwhelmed with this task? Or is it that I'm just not organizing my time as well? Because if that's the case, then all you're doing is flagging to the boss that you need help or you need extra training or something like that might be the case. Or, worst case scenario, you're just not coping. So I think it's really important. And, this is a Socratean chant that says, first know thyself. Before you go saying no to the boss, you could say, let me think about that. Let me think about how I can get it into my work schedule. Let me take it on board and can we do a trial? That sort of thing. Um, can we have a chat
Yeah,
about this? And I'll take it over for the next week and then I'll be back in your office and you'll let me know whether I'm doing a good enough job of it and I'll let you know what's happening over here.
that's right. And it's not a black and white, like a yes or no, necessarily like a yes or no. Sometimes there is some wiggle room and you can negotiate. I mentioned this, I'm sure, a few times, that I worked in software development, and the software developers are very much black and white, very analytical, which is all needed and it's all really good. And I remember one of them, a really senior developer who was always, always hunted down by others to help them solve the problems. And he loved it. But it put him under so much stress because he just didn't have the time. And we
mm,
had a chat about it. And I said, look, and the people were saying that he's grumpy because in his despair he could just say no, can't do it. And I gave him the option. I said what I said at the beginning. I said, tell the person, I'd love to help you now, but I'm really working on a high priority project right now. I can look at it whenever you think is the right time. And people will, and he said, oh, he didn't think of that because it was such a black and white, yes or no. And I
mm,
said that gives the other person the perception that you want to help. And I know you do want to help. But if you're
mm.
working on a high priority project, you can't really. So I taught him that simple sort of sentence, really. And it totally relieved him. He was like completely, oh my God,
Mm.
I wouldn't have thought of this. I mean, geeks are sometimes very
Trust me,
um,
printers can
really,
be
really
exactly the same.
smart,
You
really,
know.
really smart. But yeah, no, and that changed the whole relationship with him and others
Mm.
rocking on, and we were getting feedback that this person is so friendly now, so approachable.
Yeah, probably
um,
because he didn't feel like he had to do everything.
that's
But his
that's
ego
right.
was being serviced, so he wanted to be everything, but you gave him a way to have his cake and eat it too.
That's
So,
right. That's right. And that is also something that needs to be learned a bit, and it's also maybe a little bit more challenging if it is your boss.
mm,
Um, but also I've also seen the other side, as in where the manager had a perception of one of their team members to be lazy.
mm,
And I was coaching the manager, and as I was hearing the story, I thought that doesn't sound like laziness to me. So, it may appear to be lazy, but you also need to talk to this person. But something has changed in the workload, and they were covering up for a couple of employees who have left. And her team member was not coping with that, and there was no communication about that. And the manager was also traveling a lot, but it was also the responsibility of both the manager to check in and ask what's happening, as well as the team member saying, I'm so overwhelmed, and now I'm in analysis paralysis. And yeah, so it's the context, understanding if something has changed, and sometimes there is too much work,
mm,
and it
mm.
is not really possible to do that. Yeah, it always comes down to communication.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. Now,
Of course.
what I'm hearing about here is the communication between employer and employee, and trust.
Mm,
Now, inevitably, if you want someone who has less power than you to trust you, then you go first. The person with the power goes first with vulnerability. The first, a good leader. And why would they do that? Well, because they want to maximize the engagement, because an engaged worker is three times as productive as a disengaged worker. And if a
that's
disengaged
right.
worker will become, nothing will make them become disengaged faster than feeling that they're not being heard, or they're not important, they don't care, that nobody cares about them. And when you overwork a worker, then you are showing, you're demonstrating loud and clear to them that you really don't care. You've not even taken the time to go there. So if we talk about this podcast as leading with influence. If you really want to lead with influence, know not only thyself, but know thy employees. Know them. Make sure that the trust is there so as they can tell you the truth. I had
That's
a situation once where it festered. It was a couple of layers down from me, and I can't remember the exact details, but this situation of non-performance had been lingering on for 6 months or more, and it had been covered up by other employees because nobody trusted the manager to tell them what was really going on. Well, not good enough. Not good enough. I mean, the employee, we had to sort that out, but I had to sort the manager out as well. And was that on me? Probably, because hey, I was the top. I was where the buck stopped. But you know, these things happen,
It,
and
yeah.
nobody is perfect. All you can ever do is endeavor to be as kind and decent and firm with each other and honest. What can we do? And that requires us to be very honest with ourselves, who we are being, who we are turning up as. If we do that, then we'll find ourselves a lot more empowered. I wish I knew then what I knew now. It
Oh,
wouldn't have happened.
you're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, I
It's
bet I am.
like, yeah, hey, when when I started
And
out,
that's a
I
point
didn't.
I'd like to make here, Jacqueline.
There
You
were
know,
many
like
things I didn't know.
yeah.
Um,
So,
and
one of the smart things people can do is listen to people who have been there and done that, listen to the mistakes, and don't write them off because they openly admit they made mistakes. Oh, that happened on my watch. I've learned from it. I'm giving you the
yeah,
benefit of that knowledge.
yeah, yeah. And the thing is this, I mean, the topic of awareness is also very important. Also, as a manager,
Hmm.
as busy as you are, or everyone really is, um, that you need to foster a certain awareness, and that doesn't mean that you spend hours on it. It's just it's an intention. For example, if you when you come in the morning into the workplace and you just see how people are working, or you go on your lunch break, or you go to a meeting and you check in and you just kind of sense the room and the people who are there, and you get a sense if something is off, if someone is has changed, if some performance has changed, anything that's changed, um, especially if it's on a downward spiral, you want to check in and not kind of be in denial
Yes.
about it. Or we had this podcast, Willful Blindness, where we just pretend, I'm
Mm.
sure it'll go away. What I found is it
Mm.
doesn't go away. Like if you see
It festers.
something and you think, oh, I'm sure
Mm.
it'll work itself out. Sometimes it does, but you also want to be very sort of aware and conscious around it. Sometimes you have to let people work it out themselves, and you don't need
Yeah.
to step in. But then you have the awareness there's a conflict, there's something happening.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, yeah,
And you have to
yeah.
monitor it and make sure that it doesn't blow up and become problematic.
That's right. That's right.
Mm.
Because as soon as it does, I mean, it's always comes back to the rest of the team. They will suffer if there is an unspoken, unresolved conflict with
Oh,
within the team.
this reminds me of another point that we perhaps should have brought up earlier on because this is fundamental. The ability to say no to your boss can often start at the time of your interview. You can have that discussion at interview time when you're going for the job. you, or when they offer you the jobs. Okay, that's fine. And what do I do if the workload becomes too much? How do I put my hand up? How do I let you know? Yeah, there's an old saying, stitch in time saves nine. And if you can is, get as many understandings on the table as possible before you dive in, then you've got those levers to pull
Yeah,
when you need to. Hey, this is what
that's
you agreed, so I'm acting according to that. I'm not trying to be problematic here. I'm just trying to get the job done, and I can't take on any more work.
yeah. that is an also a very important point, because when you are in the interviewing phase, this is when you and you know the job is on the table for you. This is when you have negotiating power, and you can also ask them, so you know, how do you manage the workload amongst your team members, and what happens if it gets too much? And they may even say, I mean, I've worked for companies where we had weekend rollouts of software, which is just, that's how you do it. And my job was to be then available on the weekend, and that was fine. That was
Mm.
negotiated, but I
Mm.
also did get some time off for that. So, you know, understanding, okay, so when this happens, we will have to ask you to be available on the weekend. And, you know, so I went to bed with the specifications under my bed and waiting for the phone call, which always came between 3 and 5. Always.
So it was an early start to the day, was it?
It's like, yay. But I mean, that's fine. It was, you know, this was
Yeah.
part of it.
And
But
when you know what the parameters are, you can live with that.
it
So what we're talking
that's
about
right.
is when it
Yeah.
wanders out of the parameters, and I just wanted to summarize for people. Uh, so firstly, get in place as much understanding as you can before you take the job. That's helpful. Understand what the resolution procedures are, etc., and where you go. Jacqueline's tactic of saying, "Hey, that's a great idea, and I think it should happen. Now,
Not
what
with
one do you
me.
want? What which of these am I going to be dropping off?" It's incumbent on bosses and leaders in the business to make space so that they can get to hear the truth. And that's about the leader being vulnerable, authentic, and aware of that power imbalance and making sure that they are providing that opportunity. I'll go back to management by walking around, get to know your staff. Don't know not just yourself, but know your team as well and know what they can take and how they can take it and who's going to be able to cope more than others because we're all human. We are all different. Yeah. Have I missed anything, Jack?
Um, yeah, you have missed an important point. If you are, if you are the employee who is at the short end of the stick, make it known. I think you've
Mm,
actually mentioned that. Make
yes.
make it known. Don't just silently suffer in your seat. Just,
Yeah.
you know, in the project update meeting also say, you know, I really have a lot on my plate.
Mm,
And I would even appreciate if someone can take a task for me.
mm.
Make it known. And
But tell
also
the
make it,
truth.
yeah, the
Don't build
truth,
it
you
up.
know,
You will
don't
get
have to
caught out.
you and also, you know, make it known if you do have a lot of tasks or you get things done, make that known also, so people see, yeah, this person is really busy, they're working on all these things. And if someone has given you something or you weren't aware of it, or you know, it didn't work for you, do go find a time, you know, a good time, and have a chat to this person, you know, most likely your manager, and say that this didn't work for you. This wasn't fair. This wasn't right.
And
And
I'd like to remind
because the
listeners,
manager caved in, because that happens a
yeah,
lot. They cave in
yes.
under pressure, and then it's being, it's
And then
being,
handball it to the next person.
it's like, next. Yeah,
Look, that also goes there because we've done a podcast on how to have difficult conversations. When
yeah,
we talk about preparing people, is it okay for me I need to have a difficult conversation with you. Is this time a good time? Or should I come back another time? Then they are ready to hear something they're not going to want to hear.
yeah,
And you'll get a much better result if you pre-warn and or ask permission to
yeah,
have that difficult conversation. And they
yeah,
will, your boss will always say yes. Maybe not at that moment, but say yes. How about you come
yeah,
back at this time? Yeah.
yeah.
So it is
Yeah, I
always
think
possible.
that's right. There are always possibilities. Sometimes people can get really overwhelmed and can't see the way out.
Mm.
There are always possibilities of negotiating and finding a different approach. Yeah, yeah, I think we've
I hope we've delivered some value again, where people understand, yes, okay, here's a few gems in that. Maybe I should go back and listen to some of the earlier podcasts, search them and find out the bits that you need. It's always our pleasure to be of service. If you have a particular topic you'd like us to dig into, then let us know. And like and share, of course. That's always a great thing. And thank you so much for turning up and listening and being with us
yeah.
again. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.